So today we've got a lot of stuff to get through. We're going to run you through the component service itself. We're going to walk you through how you can leverage it to build speed, ease, and compliance into your content creation and management operations. We'll be taking a look at how to develop components, take a look at a few pre-built ones, and we'll be demonstrating to you how you can build these out, both basic and complex, from start to finish. But don't worry, for those of you who are marketing leads or content editors or digital managers, this is just as exciting for you as well, because we'll also be showing you how you can edit the content in these components, and we'll show you how you can add, edit, and reuse content across multiple pages or sites. We're hoping this will be a really, really great productivity boost and time saver for those of you who are in smaller teams and are feeling quite outnumbered on a day-to-day basis managing your content. You'll also be able to govern this content more effectively, which is one of the key reasons that we built the components in this component service. So you'll be able to actually manage duplicate content, you'll be able to change branding, manage the design elements across different channels and different sites, and we're hoping this will increase speed to market for you, as well as reduce error and human error and improve accuracy and compliance. So hopefully that all makes sense and you're in the right place. And it sounds like that's going to be of interest to you. Just before we run through the video, I just wanted to ask you a few questions, a few housekeeping things. We're recording the video, so we'll be saving this and sending it out to you all post the event, usually a day or two after. So don't worry if you miss anything. You don't need to take notes. We'll be sending you out a pre-recorded copy of this webinar. And if you've got any problems or issues, please use the chat window just to let us know and to raise any of those. And also, as we run through, if you've got any questions, please feel free to ask those as we go. And I'll be wrapping those up, and you can vote on them, and I'll be wrapping those up and answering all of those at the end. So don't wait until the end to submit the questions. Get those in as soon as you can to give people a chance to get the creative juices flowing and think about things. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Virtual Chris now. I'm going to run you through the component service.
Hi, I'm Chris, Senior Product Manager here at Squiz. For the last 18 months, my team and I have been busy working towards Squiz's product vision to be the world's most composable DXP. So you can come as you are, build brilliant experiences fast on a platform that embraces change, meaning that you can be future-proofed to evolve your tech stack. I've been primarily focused on developer experience and how we can improve our platform to be much better for developers. Although everything we're going to show you today ultimately benefits content editors, marketers, and other business stakeholders by giving developers a better way to work on a platform. We officially launched our component service today, and I'm excited to show some demos with you. By the end of the session, you will learn how the new component service increases speed to market for all of your teams. So what is the component service? The component service is just one of many services within the DXP, and one of the many new features we're introducing this year to get us closer to our product vision. Basically, a component can be any section of a web page for displaying structured content or functionality. They're built by developers to enable content editors and the digital team to build pages. But how does the component service benefit you? Well, the component service has drastically reduced the onboarding time for new developers. They can start building new components and launch them if they know JavaScript, removing the need for developers to know the whole platform before they start building new components, and reducing dependence on any single matrix developer. It makes it faster to deploy new sites and microsites from a template, and introduces new functionality to those sites. You can syndicate components, meaning you can share information such as alerts or event information and easily republish across any site, whether that's matrix or a non-matrix site such as WordPress. It's simple to manage and implement web design and replicate across many sites. Here's an example of the landing page that we're going to create today in the demos with 5 different components. Components can be normal elements like these that make up your landing pages or other pages. They can also belong to a design system. Here's an example of the UK government design system implemented within our component service. And here's those components used to build the landing page in Matrix. But they can also be something much more complex, kind of like a self-contained app. They can be data-driven components individual to the logged-in user, like these examples from a student portal, with a personal calendar, GPA, and course details. These data-driven components leverage other parts of the DXP, like our data store and our integration platform, but we could also leverage other services like search. We can use search-driven components that generate dynamic listings that can be reused across websites, or in this case, a whole interactive embeddable course finder feature. Everything under the header is one big component, and this could be reused again and again on different marketing landing pages, as well as the main site. Students can interact with the tool through to the comparison feature that lets them find the course that is best suited to them. Because the component service is built in a composable way, independently from the CMS, we can take these components that use all the DXP capabilities, package them up, and actually deploy them to your other websites as well. So for example, we could take an events listing powered by Funnelback, and we could deploy that component onto a range of different sites and microsites and other platforms outside of the DXP. Another simple but powerful use case here is being able to create an alert banner component and publish alerts across your whole web presence, with the branding and the content managed and governed centrally within the DXP. There are three main personas that can benefit from Squiz's component service, and they are developers, content editors, and web and digital teams. In the next 20 minutes, I'll take you through a demonstration of our component service so you can see how developers can reduce development time and maintenance cost of sites, content editors can create unique pages, stories, and marketing campaigns fast without ongoing developer support, web, digital, and marketing teams can save time, govern content with ease, and get total control over their brand. So what does the component service actually change if you're using Matrix today? Well, the main thing is that we pulled the component service out as its own separate part of the platform, which allows us to serve developers directly in a way that is more suitable to them, allowing them to write native code in their local environment and test locally using standard JavaScript or frameworks of their choice, and allowing them to bring in some automation around testing and deployment. All of this adds up to much better autonomy and a faster feedback loop for developers. Developers can work independently and they can work on one feature of the website without having to touch the rest of it, which makes it much easier to work with Squiz services or your partner agencies. Our editors can then use these components in the existing Matrix interface. Ultimately, this gives editors more autonomy and a faster feedback loop as well. Finally, our web managers and web teams, they will now have a set of tools to allow them to manage component libraries. And there's a whole set of features around managing versions of components, so developers can comfortably deploy and automate their deployment. But the stakeholders can choose when they decide to roll out different versions of the components to different libraries. So this might be a test and production library, but it could also be completely different branding for different marketing microsites or any purpose that the web managers see fit. They'll also be able to preview the components and share those previews with stakeholders. And these features add up to much greater visibility and governance for web managers and web and digital teams across large organizations. So before we get into the demo, let's have a look at what we're going to build. So I'm going to preview this page in Matrix. This is already built. This is our landing page made up of components with all of the content coming from Matrix content in the component service. So we can see at the top we've got our alert banner, we've got a big hero carousel, and below that we've got a find a course panel. Then we've got a couple of other components here. But if I switch now to the business school site, we're going to see an alternate version of the design system. So everything looks similar, but a little bit different, and not just styling different from CSS style sheets, but functionally different as well. So a lot of things like the news here that was previously a carousel and the course listing, they're functionally different as well as styled differently. So we'll show how we're going to build all of this. First up, we'll focus on the demo for developers. And we're going to start with our alert bar. And then we'll make a more complex component with the course list. So I start by opening my code editor. You can see here on the left all of the components I've already got, but I'm going to open a terminal within VS Code to start creating a new one. To do that, I type in dxp-next cmp init and the name of the component, alert banner, hit enter. It's automatically creating me a folder with all of the details to get started working on that component. I've got a couple of folders, a JavaScript file, and this manifest.json, the key file for setting up our component. We'll set the name to alert banner, and we'll set up a namespace, which allows us to organize our different components so they don't clash. We'll give it a friendly name of alert bar. We can also set up a description, and this is going to come in handy for when content editors are choosing which components to put on a page later. The version we're going to leave as the default, which is 001. Here we can set up an icon. So I'm going to choose a code from the Material UI library, and I can configure a hex color for the icon as well. This is going to make it much more scannable for content editors and other stakeholders when they browse component libraries. The functions field is where we configure most of our component. So it tells us which JavaScript file we're using to render our function, but the input field is the most important one. This is where we define the data model. And to do that, I can use JSON schema, which is a nice industry standard with lots of tooling. And I can start to define data structures like an object with required fields, with titles and properties, and I can do arrays inside other objects. For now, I'm going to add in an alert title, an alert content, and I'll also add in an alert color, which editors can use to change the background color of the alert. And I'll add in an alert status field so that editors can easily turn an alert on and off. But these are just the names of the fields. What we want to do next is actually set up the types of fields, and these will be used to automatically generate an editing form for our editors. Now within each of my fields, I can define a title, which will be displayed in the editing form. So we want it to say alert title. I can put in a description for each field, so usually a 1 to 2 sentence description to help out editors when they're editing the form. And also define the data type. So this one's going to be a string, it's just plain text. And the alert content is going to be very similar to the alert title. It's another text box basically. But for our alert color, we're going to do something a little bit more specific. So I want the editors to choose from a list of allowed colors. So we're going to have red, orange, yellow, cyan, and blue. For this, we can use the enum field, and that not only constrains the input, it'll generate a select list to make it easy to choose one of the options. Our alert status is a different data type again. It's a Boolean field, so a simple yes or no. Now, let's switch to our JavaScript rendering function. By default, it just gives us a very simple function that returns one hello world string. We'll add our own code in here now, starting with a simple map of the input colors to the specific hex codes. Next, we'll select the color that we want to use as the background color based on the input object that is passed into the rendering function. Now we're going to add an if statement here to check the alert status also from the same input object. If the alert status is false, then we'll simply return a HTML comment. If the alert is enabled, then we're going to render the component. But our hello world template literal won't get us too far. I'll expand on this template and I'm adding in a wrapping div, and you can see here in the top right, I'm printing the color in an inline style. Adding in some more containers here for the layout of our alert. And then finally, printing the input title into the left-hand column. And our alert content into the right-hand column. Now we're going to want to test out our template and see how our component renders. To do that, we go over to the previews folder and we set up some mock preview data. This data is in JSON format and it fulfills the JSON schema we created in the input section of the manifest before. So we'll go ahead and create some mock data for an alert. We enter the alert title, alert contents, and so on, and we're going to create some content about a storm warning that's going to be put up across the top of all of the websites to alert students. Then we'll switch over to the preview.html file, which is like a wrapper that helps us provide any global styling scripts or HTML structure that we need to preview the component properly. For now, I'm just adding one global script tag. I'll start up the terminal again, and this time we'll run the local dev server by running dxpnx cmp dev and the name of the component. The server starts and we get a list of all components, in this case, alert banner. And here's our yellow storm warning in the layout that we coded. But let's test some changes. We'll change the text, change the color, and we can see that preview again. We can see it in orange, and we can try turning the status off as well, and we can see the alert is not displayed. Now that we've tested our component, let's go ahead and deploy it. So we log into the DXP console in the CLI. We type in the DXP deploy command. Our component is deployed instantly, and we should now be able to find it on the All Component screen. There's our alert bar. And when we click through, we're going to see the same previews we tested with locally, which makes it really easy to share my progress with content editors, designers, and other stakeholders. But of course, our alert bar is probably the most simple possible component. Let's have a look at something more complex that we've already set up, which is our course listing component. This one is intended as a list of promoted courses for use on a landing page. So it's going to show a card for each course. One of the first things that's new here is this environment line, and we've got an environment named alt. And we'll come back to that throughout the demo. When we go down to the input object, it's much more involved. So we've got a courses field here, which is a type of array, and that array is an array of objects, which each have their own properties, such as title, school, and URL. Now switching over to the main JavaScript file, we can see here that we've loaded in a few libraries to our component. We're using handlebars for templating. We're also using the info object, which lets us access the environment variable we saw configured in the manifest, which we're using then to conditionally load a different template for the business school. And then finally, we're rendering the handlebars template. By separating our templates out and using handlebars, we can make our code much simpler, and we can have dedicated templates for really clear purposes. We loop through the course objects in the courses array and then display content for each course. Now we can use anything here like JSX, React, Vue, but handlebars is just a nice simple example. Let's run our development server again, and this time we've got a whole set of components here. This time I've got a more interesting component here that I can interact with some more content in it. But let's come back to that environment variable we mentioned earlier. I'm going to set a local environment variable in my command line interface and run the development server again. And when I click on the course list, now I can see a completely different look and feel. With the environment variable set, we're now loading in the template used by the business school for their variant of the design system, while we keep everything packaged together in one component. Now let's focus on the content editing experience and see how content editors can create content faster with components. We're going to use our same university landing page example, and we're going to use the components from before. We're going to add a course list, a hero banner slider, and an alert bar. In the DXP console, we have a library for our design system, and we click through to the course list component, and we can see here the preview of the latest version of the course component, which we can interact with. In Matrix Admin, we'll start with a blank page, and we click Edit, click the plus icon, and we select our components from the right-hand menu. We've selected the course list. We're going to add some content to that. We can click a plus icon to add the individual course records, and we can add as many of those items as we like. I'll go ahead and fill out all the content for those. We've got names and descriptions and schools and images. And now we want to click on the page and preview it in a new window. And we can see here our component behaving just like it did in the DXP console, but now with the real content from the CMS. I'm going to load the edit screen and the real page side by side, so I can show, as I'm editing the content, I'm changing the title and the introductory text, and now I'm going to drag and drop and rearrange the courses. Which is going to change the order of the courses in the component when I save and reload the page. So as we reload the page, we can see the astrotourism course is now in first place. Now we'll test the hero banner slider. Again, we'll preview it so we can kind of play around and see what this component is going to look like when we add it to the page. Make sure it's the right one we want to use. We can test all of the animations with the preview content. Back in Matrix Admin, again, we'll click on our plus icon, select the hero banner slider this time, and we can start adding slides. I click Show Advanced Settings, which gives me some conditional fields for a more advanced user, and then I add the rest of the slides. Let's do one more. Back in the DXP console, we'll check out the testimonials component. Again, look at some of the sample content. We'll add that to the page. choosing testimonials from the right-hand column. And then we'll add in our content and quotes. Now that we've built out the content on our page, we can preview it again. We can click through and see all of the content we've added to the sliders. So the course listing, and to the testimonials from our happy students. We've been able to pull together the whole landing page very quickly with components. But let's look at one last use case for content reuse with our alerts component. So we have a page with an alert component on it, and we're going to add a second alert. This time it's a heat wave, and it's cyan color because it's not quite as serious as the thunderstorm. When we reload the page, we see the second alert on the page, and this can be distributed out to lots of our different sites. Now we've seen how developers build components and how editors can use them. Let's have a look at some of the features for web, digital, and marketing teams to help govern component libraries and design systems. Within the DXP, you can have many different component libraries. I'm going to select the university one, and we'll add some new components to this library. I'll select the course list component, and I'll accept all the version settings by default. I'll do the same to add my testimonials component into the library as well. So I've already got a design system set for my library, but I want to do something a little bit different now. I actually want to create a specialized design system for the business school. So they have their own sub-brand, which is similar to the university, but behaves a little bit different and has its own look and feel. So I want to organize a set of components around that and make it available to my business school stakeholders. Creating the new set is as simple as adding in the name, an identifier, and a description that's going to help explain what the component library is for. And then clicking create. A brand new empty component set. Now I can add the components just like I did before, or I could add different components as well that are specific to business. This time when I add the course list component, I'm going to take a closer look at these version settings. This is where I can exercise a lot of control around which versions of components that are updated and deployed by developers are released to my stakeholders. So I could specify here only version 005 can be used, which would mean that version 006, which is already released, and any new versions wouldn't be released to the business school straight away. This is really important when we want to stage a rollout of a design system, especially to different sub-brands within a large federated organization. There's also fine-grained controls for choosing multiple specific editable versions. This is mostly useful for special handling of breaking changes between multiple versions. There's also options to block specific versions that have been published in the past in case they have an issue with content or security. The last powerful feature that we want to show from the component sets is the environment variables feature. This is often used for API keys and other secrets, but today we're going to use a visual example by demonstrating the business school sub-brand. So let's check out the business school homepage. We've got the same components, but different content, specialized content for the business school. And when we preview that, it's going to look exactly the same as the homepage, just with different content, different images in the slider, and so on. If I open up the university and business homepages side by side, we can see that they look very, very similar, which you want with a design system. But with our business school, we do have a sub-brand that we want to apply. To do that, I'll go back to the DXP console, to my School of Business Design System library, and I'll click on Environment Variables, and I'll add a variable. I'm going to call it Alt, which is the one we used in the earlier developer example, and I'm going to set the value of business, just like we used when we tested locally. When I reload the site now, I can see that all of the components are automatically picking up the business variants and displaying the different business styling and business functionality. The courses are flattened into a list without a carousel. and the rest of the site is following a consistent styling for the business sub-brand.
Hoping that all made sense to everyone and that didn't cut out anywhere through. You were able to listen to Chris explaining how that works. So that's obviously 3 examples that Chris has run through there: building alert banner from scratch, and editing an existing carousel and course listing component to show you how those work. Obviously, there's a lot more you can do with components. As those of you that have built container templates in Matrix will know, there's pretty much the sky's the limit on how to do this. I've got a few questions here I'm going to run through and answer. Hopefully it might give you guys some other ideas for other questions to ask as we go. So yeah, in terms of questions, I've got one upvoted here. I'm just going to start from the top and work down. Can you give an example of how a higher education institution is using components? So yes, we have had a couple of HE clients on our beta testing program over the last 4 or 5 months running component service. Obviously, it's officially launching today, launched end of last week in Australia. We have been building, the majority of components we've been building have been listing components. So as Chris just showed, having course listings, having article news listings, that kind of thing, repeatable elements of content. The most useful is probably course listings, news listings, staff listings. There have been a couple of customers that are looking at actually using components as a way of centralizing their editing experience as well. So it's worth knowing that this component service not only renders an editing interface in Matrix for you to use, it also the rendering service produces an output of JSON or HTML. So some customers are actually looking at using the component service as a way of centralizing all their editing in Matrix in standardized templates, and then actually pushing all that content back out as consumable pieces of content for other services to aggregate and include on external sites, either with JavaScript client-side embed code, an iframe if needed, or even rendering that server-side, assuming that your platform supports that. So you can also build components to centralize content management and then push those back out from the component service to your other third-party sites. So yeah, there's a lot you can do. Probably one of the best synergies though is using the component service to give you a editing interface for data coming from Funnelback. So say the second question here is, how does component service work with other capabilities? In the case of Funnelback, you can get the component to make a request off to a Funnelback endpoint, which obviously returns structured data, and you can then render that with the component configuration and the manifest, and then have that render a nice editing interface for those data feeds in Matrix, and tell the component just to loop through all instances of the content in that endpoint. So yeah, it's going to be very useful for giving you editing interfaces for external data feeds as well, which is probably one of the biggest use cases that we foresee as part of this. Hopefully that will make sense. Any other questions, please add them in. Any other thoughts? Another one here from Mary. In terms of how the component service differs from other Matrix components and container templates. So obviously this component service is a new service that's being launched as part of our DXP. So you'll need to, in order to have access to it on a Squiz cloud hosted system, you'd need to be on, currently the latest is 6.29 to have access. For SaaS customers, it will be available immediately. If you're on a new version and you're considering building some components in the component service, you would actually need to look at the markup that you're currently using in your container templates or nested data records or layouts in the old templating formats in Matrix, move that configuration logic over into component service, and rebuild the editing interface and the manifest that Chris has run through there. So you'd need to rework that configuration, but we do have currently in development some scripts and a framework, a library for migrating the actual underlying content. So there's a separation of work here. One is building the new component with the manifest, with all of the logic and the markup for the editing interface and for rendering, for the previews for the rendering for the output. And then the second part of that is actually how you move the content over. So yes, you would need to build the component from scratch, but in terms of the content, we're planning on releasing a framework for migrating the content out of the nested container template in Matrix or the data record with the associated metadata. We're working on building a script to actually allow you to migrate that over. So you would run that script with some parameters and you would migrate the content from the container template into the component service component. So hopefully that makes sense, Mary, and that answers your question. I guess just to add to that, we're not turning off any of the existing functionality in Matrix. So if you actually feel like you want to just try out the component service for a few small components on a microsite or a landing page, you can use them completely exclusively of one another. Container templates, content container templates aren't going anywhere. They'll be there, and you'll still be able to use those as a viable pattern. So it's not an all or nothing thing. You can continue to work with both patterns going forward. But for editing experience, it would be good to try and centralize around component service in the future if you can. In terms of the other last pre-question I've got here, because there's a few impending we'll get to in a second. There will be, if you have access to the Squiz Academy and you're an existing customer, there will be component service development training courses available. Obviously, for our beta program, we've already released these to our own internal developers within our team, as well as a couple of customers on the beta program. So yes, you will have access to Squiz Academy training for how to use these component service features going forward. Okay, right, great. So I've got a few other questions here as well. So I've got one from John here, which is there an out-of-box Squiz component library, or is there plans for a community? Yes, so as with all of our other plugins and libraries coming from the plug-and-play team like Skeleton, there will be a set of components released for the component service that will be available on the marketplace. Those will be approved, so they'll be reviewed, managed, and maintained and approved by our team that run the marketplace. We're also envisaging customers being able to submit their own components if they'd like to share with the wider group, be able to submit their own components to the marketplace for review and approval. So yes, we see us developing over the next 6-12 months a large library of components ready for you to download and install within the marketplace. There are already a few that are there, like the cards navigation and the carousel listings that are available that you can install from a public Git repo that's already available with the component service. Okay, great. So got another question here from Matthew. How does front-end JavaScript integrate with the component system? So if you use a front-end framework with the benefits of server rendering, would teams need to roll your own hydration? Are there any users doing this? So yes, there are a couple of different ways of doing this. At the moment, as this is in the early stages, what we've got for deployment is you can either deploy out your own packages separately, or you can build all of your standard resources into the repo and matrix and the component service will actually dedupe any shared resources between components dynamically. If you're looking at managing everything separately, we obviously support any JavaScript-based framework. What we are currently using is React with client-side hydration. So yes, that's actually the approach that we're taking for releasing our own officially supported components. So you will have access to a set of plug-and-play components that we can share with you that do use server-side rendering via React and then have client-side hydration. So that's the pattern that we're using. Okay, two more here. Mark's asked, are WCAG checks baked into the components? No, they're not currently. That is something that's being considered in order to fit in with our standard matrix toolkit for WCAG compliance. That's something that we're considering at a future release point. So yes, thank you for flagging. That's a good question. We're looking to make that available. And there's a final one in here for Funnelback Cloud customers. So if it depends, at the moment, it depends on the licensing agreement that you have with us. So you can download and run the component service components locally right now. So you can all go off and do that to test it out and try it. But in order to deploy components, you actually need access to the DXP console to manage the component sets and the design system and actually deploy the components out with the variables for different environment structures. So yeah, you do actually need a DXP contract with us in order to do that. Most customers currently are on older contracts, so that's something that you need to take up with your account manager, or it'd be a good opportunity to email ask@squiz.net if you have a particular use case that you'd like feedback on. But yes, as a Funnelback customer, I see no reason why you would not be able to adjust the agreement in order to be given access to be able to use these components and integrate them with another third-party system. So you don't need to be using Matrix in order to actually deploy these components out and use them elsewhere. Okay, that's all of the questions. Does anyone have any other questions? We've got a chunk of time for Q&A. If you can't think of anything at the moment, please feel free to send an email, as we mentioned. You can always get in contact with us on the ask@squiz.net address and follow up separately. If you've got any questions around your existing agreement and how that fits into our DXP moving forward, again, please ask, send us an email or talk to your account manager. I know we have discussed our DXP migrations with quite a few of you as existing customers as part of our deep dives. If we haven't yet had that conversation with you, please contact us and let us know that this is of interest to you. Likewise, we've also got other beta testing programs coming up in the future for our personalization engine, our CDP, as well as our form system. So the product roadmap looks very, very busy and very exciting over the next 12 months. So now is a good time to get in touch with us if you're looking at updating your agreement and being able to access the other DXP functionalities and services we provide. So yeah, can't see any other questions. So that's it from us. So that brings our session to a close. Just want to thank you all for joining us today. Apologies if you only got half of my intro with the sound there, but hopefully you got all of Chris's video and that all makes sense. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you, getting follow-up questions at ask@squiz.net. And this recording will be making its way over to you by email within the next couple of days. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time, everyone. That's us.